Welcome back to the show. Today we have Andrea Picchi. He's the lead experience designer at Sony Mobile. Andrea, welcome back to the show.
Welcome, thanks you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you back on the show. You and I had a really good conversation a while back, kind of about design and kind of what's important and why, people at all sizes of companies should really care about design. But maybe kind of before we get into that, maybe let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with kind of where you grew up.
Yeah, so basically I grew up in Italy, Tuscany, and with a huge passion for computer, born and raised in the era of Commodore 64.
Sure.
And so I had two basically passion in my life. One was psychology and the other one was computer science. So back then in the 90s was quite hard to understand that there was something called the human computer interaction that put together the best of both worlds. So for me, it was more about, okay, let's start to study cognitive psychology and then we'll see. For a little while, I wanted to be a psychologist, but then at the end of my career as a psychologist, after graduation, I just decided to just start all over another career because I felt that I wanted to just go dive deep into technology knowledge. And I started in another career in the computer science department. And then at the end was around 2005. I just started to connecting the dots and dive deep into what now I know is called human-computer interaction. And what was a lot of foggy back then, turns out to be an advantage because I had a deep knowledge in the humanistic, especially knowing people, and then in the technology. So it was really a benefit, a plus, yeah.
Sure.
Me.
No, that makes sense. And so do you maybe want to kind of quickly cover some of the companies and kind of projects you've worked on? Because you've worked on some big name projects and at big name companies.
Yeah. After human computer interaction, I started to work at Apple and I covered. Actually, before it was Google, and at the time that they acquired Android, was around 2005, and then released in 2007. They were in need of someone that was able to combine psychologist skills and then technology skills. And then another stint at Apple, when at the time that they were about to release the new iOS for iPad, and then all the other experience, Amazon and eBay. And then I moved back to Europe and had the chance to work for Nokia in Finland, in the HQ in Helsinki, and then moved to South Korea and for working for Samsung. At the time they released the Galaxy S5, between S4 and S5, when they designed the S Health, and then again back to Europe and working in gambling. We're in a big gambling company, and then Ryanair. Then Europe is the bigger airline that we have here, and then Virgin Media and another company that was working with Google DeepMind on artificial intelligence and healthcare. And now Sony Mobile working on the Sony Xperia. So in a nutshell, 20 plus year.
That's awesome though. So I'm curious, what does design mean to you?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. At the core, I believe design is a conversation and it's a show conversations. Happen first and foremost in your mind. Sometimes in an inclusive way, when you start thinking about something and then you start to bring outside your mind that concept, you start to bounce idea with other people around you. But if you think about it, it's always about talking in a good way, not about being fluffy, right? But in the beginning, when you think about something, you really try to discern a problem. You try to attack a problem, come up with a solution and a hypothesis. And what you do, doesn't matter if you're sketching, doesn't matter if you talk, doesn't matter if you later down in the process you prototype. What you do is always materialize an idea and trigger a conversation inside the team in many different ways. In the beginning is between you, and then you and the team, and then became a sketch, and then became a wireframe, and then a mock-up, and then a prototype. But this is just the backbone of something that happened on top that is just a conversation between the people in the team. Yeah.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's always interesting to get different takes on that, right? And I totally agree with you. I think you're right. It is a conversation, and I think it's super important. But I'm curious to know, kind of like, how do you bring design thinking to a company? Because a lot of companies
Yeah.
don't really. I think a lot of companies kind of forget about it, or it's such an afterthought, right? And kind of, where does it kind of stand in a company?
Yeah, well, design thinking it's a mindset, and so in order to bring that mindset, you really have to go deep inside people. It's about changing people's behavior. It's about changing the way they look at the world, because for the most part, what define a designer is the way how that person look at the world. So in a nutshell, again, if we look at the design thinking as a mindset, divide into step, empathize with the user, diverge with as much solution as possible, explore the problem domain, converge and try to downsize and focus and try to understand what is the best idea or the best ideas, and then prototype those ideas and then collect feedback, eventually iterate or move on. If we use that process or mindset or backbone to just approach the problem, we can start saying that if we look at the first step, empathize, we have to support the team in a way that is able to connect with the user. So do we have a usability lab? Do you integrate the research into your process? Do you have a good discovery phase? And then when you start, for example, to diverge, you can say, okay, we need a space that the people they can use to come up with the idea. We need a space that is able to engender creativity. And then, for example, when you start to converge and then you need a lot of people to take a decision, you need a way to synchronize the entire team. So are you using the right UX deliverable, for example, a nice user journey, or maybe do you have a space when you can put things on the wall that can help you to have everyone's together in the same place and trigger a nice conversation based on UX deliverable instead of just thinking out of the box, but with no connection to the real problem. And then if we move on and we have the prototyping steps, do we have the tools that you need? Do you have a usability lab when you can just bring your prototype to live? Do you have space in your sprint
Sure.
to build the prototype? And again, the test and the feedback collection is, do you have a lab? Do you integrate everything? So it may be an easy way to start with. It's not the final answer, but that's, as you can see, already put on the table a lot of things for
Sure.
someone to just consider and say, oh, do we have those things or not?
No, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I know when we were on the radio show, we kind of talked about the importance of kind of having, design be a cornerstone of your business strategy, and kind
Yeah,
of a chief design officer.
yeah.
Somebody should be kind of at that like high level executive that really cares about design. And so, what's your opinion on that? And how do you go about kind of making design a very
Yeah.
important strategy in a company?
Yeah, as you said, you really need the backup from the top and the initiative from the bottom. And if I can make a step back, the reason is because basically the impact that you have with your team is defined by the range of action that your most senior design have. So what I mean by that, if the most senior guys in the company is the lead UX, you can only affect your team. If you have the head of design, you can only affect your department. But if you have a chief design officer, you can affect the entire company with the support from the CEO. That's what frame and define the impact that you can have. And then, of course, you need initiative from the bottom, right,
Sure.
to fire up the entire movement to get traction. But yeah, that's the most important thing. But going back to the point, what do we want to prefer in which direction? What do we want to attack first? Which part?
I think maybe like, how do you bring it in as a strategy, and like, how do you bring that
Yeah,
into a company? I think people struggle with that, especially
yeah,
if they're the designer, right?
yeah. So yeah, again, with the help from the top and the initiative from the bottom. If you want to bring design at the core of the business strategy, it's first of all, the reason is because design it's a great tool when we have to deal with ambiguity.
Sure.
And it's probably useful for the people understand the differentiation that you have between design thinking and the other. We can say that usually we say that we have at least, there are more, but we have at least three major way of thinking. You have the engineering thinking that usually we say that has solved its way through, because the goal of the engineering thinking is to just frame the problem, isolate the variables, put the variables into an equation, and then solve the equation. But you can't really easily see that if you don't have all the variables up front. That type of thinking doesn't really work well, because you struggle. You can't really solve the equation. And then you have the business thinking. The business thinking, we used to say that optimize its way through, because basically select one solution among many solutions. For example, okay, we have a product, we wanna decide which campaign set up for that product, and then they have different approach. They pick one, and then they optimize. They put all the effort in their direction. But again, what we need to have a good business thinking, we need solutions. Sure. Right? And sometimes we don't have solution, especially when we work in an uncharted territory, when we try to innovate. But design thinking, we used to say that prototypes its way through. So the design thinking is good because when you don't have a clear idea about the problem domain, when you don't know, when you are forced to learn as you go, the design thinking is a great tool to just learn on the go, because the prototype is not the goal, is not the objective, but the prototype is just another way to frame the problem and to ask questions.
Sure.
So using that mindset for you is very, very easy to just move on, learn and move on, learn and move on. And when you want to do something like, imagine 10 years ago, let's reinvent the phone industry. Or maybe nowadays, let's rethink the healthcare.
Sure.
Or how can we bring water in a village in the south of Africa, right? A new type of problem, then you can't look at someone else and just copy the solution, right?
Sure.
You have to be, in that case, be creative, but be creative means come up with the solution that is brand new. So in that case, design thinking shown to be very, very powerful. And as we work in not the IT, but in digital space, innovation, the landscape changed so rapidly. So design thinking is definitely a powerful tool.
Sure. No, I think it's interesting, and it kind of leads into kind of the next thing I want to cover with you is, I at least in my opinion, I think design is almost, in a lot of people's eyes, kind of been a race to the bottom. Like, you can get a professionally done logo for $5 online, or you can buy a website template. And, you know, for some small projects, those can make sense. But, like, when you're trying to really build a brand to stand out, like, the big brands of the world spend a ton of time and money on it. Like, that's Apple's entire business model. Google's gotten a lot better at design over the last, handful of years, right? And you see even like Facebook and all the big companies are really spending a lot more time on design. So in your opinion, how can design kind of add value to a business? And why is it important?
Yeah, it is important because maybe we can start from an example. If we look about 2012, and we try to remember what happened with Instagram. So
Sure.
Instagram acquired by Facebook for 1.1 billion, right?
Yep.
So what the people don't know is that the week before the acquisition, the book value, what the MBA guys called, so the value of the company, the book value, was 85 million.
Really?
And the week before was 35 million. The investor, they put 50 million just to pump up the transaction.
Sure.
Right? So the question is, why Facebook paid 1.1 billion if the book value, basically it's the quantitative value of the company is 85 million. And the reason is because behind Instagram, there was so much qualitative value
Yeah.
that in the MBA lingo, they put like a goodwill. They call it goodwill. And they put it in the book because they don't have a label for that. So they used to call it goodwill.
Okay,
The
interesting.
rest, so if you say 1.1 billion minus 85, you know how much is the qualitative value against the quantitative. So, but when you want to deliver qualitative value, you have to be ready to deal with the huge amount of ambiguity, because you have to start to deal with people. It means that you put your company, your team, your whatever you want to do into the relationship business. And
Sure.
that's, you mentioned before, the brand, right?
Yeah.
So it's the relationship that you have with the people. So it's a people's business. So it's a and using the other type of thinking, the business and the engineering, you can't build any qualitative type of relationship with the customer, because you need to understand the why behind something happening. The pure qualitative core of the event is not just the what happening.
Sure.
In a very stupid and simple example is when you get the numbers from the analytics. This is the quantitative. But
Sure.
then, oh, we know what happening, right? But why this happening? So you have to talk with the people. So in that very simple example, you have the research and just approach the people. But when we talk about a company, is the relationship that you are able to establish with the people. So how much value you can deliver to their, how much you can align your core value with their core value.
Sure.
That is what creates the relationship with the people. And then if you can't satisfy those values, even if you are able to quantify in a numeric way, you establish something that is very, very important in the people's life. And that's when the people, they get attached to you. And that's when the people, they start to be loyal to you. And that's when you start to affect people's behavior. Just look at Apple. The people, they don't like
Sure.
Apple. People, they love Apple, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody love Microsoft, but the people, they love Apple.
Yeah.
And because that's the reason how they design and shape the brand over, in the past decades. But that's the reason. And you can't get those type of results if you don't use a design mindset, because
Sure.
otherwise you'll never be able to affect the people at their core.
No, that totally makes sense. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on, why do you think design needs to change its mindset and vocabulary to solve kind of business problems?
Well, because the mistake that a lot of time happen is that when you start to grow as a designer, maybe lead, and then you add, and maybe you get a chance to sit at the most important table in the company as a vice president or chief design officer. The risk is that you don't realize that the people around you are not designer.
Yeah, fair. That's a good point.
Yeah. So you have to keep the nice designish conversation for your fellow designers. So you don't want to talk about your craft in that room. And you have to understand that you can and you have to use design to solve business problems. I give an example here at Sony. We had a problem with the developers, young developers retention, and how to find new developers in the university. So
Sure.
this is a pure business problem. But how we solve it? Basically, we apply design thinking to that problem, and we start to build. First of all, to talk with the guys in the university. What is your aspiration? What do you want for a career? What do you think it's a good place to work? What is your dream? What do you want to achieve as a developer? And then we started to come up with initiative and things. And then we just interview again and we ship it and we say, okay, what do you think about this? Do you think now Sony is more appealing to you if we can just provide, for example, a good environment or maybe initiative or different type of teams? And we iterate that solution that for us was the prototype. For us was the prototype. So
Sure.
having, for example, a website for the people to go and look at and be present in the most important tech conferences, and then allocate budget for their career progression, and then even have big problem to solve in the company, not just creating funds, but try to change the world for the better. So a lot of things that we just collect as a findings from the research, and we put together that prototype. There wasn't an interface. It wasn't a font.
Fair.
It wasn't a proposition for them. And then we iterate. That is an example of how we use design thinking to just solve something that wasn't UI, wasn't
Yeah.
Android, was a Xperia font. But in the very same way, you have to approach that type of conversation, learning business in 2 words. It means that you have to change your vocabulary.
Yeah.
You have to understand the different priorities. And with that, I'm not meaning that business is more important than user needs. I'm just saying that if I go to Japan, if I learn Japanese, probably will be better for me in terms of
Sure.
communication. So if I enter a room with business people, you have to be ready to talk that type of language and leave the nice, fluffy things that sometimes we like it for our fellow designers, right?
Sure. No, I think that's really good advice. So we're kind of coming to the end of the show, but I got one kind of last final thing I want your thoughts on. And I'm wondering, how do you use leadership and kind of psychology to actually change and bring bring a design mindset into the organization?
It's good. How many episodes we have?
Oh, I'm sure
So,
we can do as many as you want, buddy.
so that's a great question. It's something that it's still an ongoing project here. We have a lot of initiative covering this topic. But again, in a nutshell, just to trick curiosity in the people that can listen the episode. So there is something called the FOG model, behavioral model in psychology. So basically define the behavior, the say that the behavior is equal by motivation, multiply ability, multiply a trigger. So you have to be motivated to do something, and then you need to be capable of doing something. You
Sure.
need to have the skill and the ability. And then you need a trigger, like a spark, to just initiate the change. So how do you change people? You need to think about it in terms of motivation, ability, and trigger. So motivation divided into two, intrinsic and extrinsic. So you need the leadership to provide a vision, for example, for the intrinsic, so it can set your value. And then there is the extrinsic that is set by, I don't know, the more stupid, it's a good salary, but also a good environment. There is a lot of things. So you need to set up the motivation from inside you and from outside you. And that's one part. So create the studio, and I give you a reason, a purpose as a designer, as a developers, and give you great problems to solve, give you the chance to impact and make the difference. These are just few examples from
Sure.
very holistic way of motivate people. And then for the ability part, or for the ability pillar, we need to coach you. So you need to put in place initiatives. We have to fill the gaps if you have some gaps. We need to just coach you and teach you how to do things, and let you fail, and sometimes pick you up, sometimes let you pick up by yourself, but basically stay with you and give you all the tools that you need to get the job done. And then for the trigger, the last part, the last pillar, you need a great leader that is able to iterate the vision, that is able to point in the direction and say, this is, Kevin, is what we want to achieve as a team. This is what I want you to achieve as a designer, and be able to iterate and iterate for the team, that vision, and then balance the three. But if something is missing, the people that don't react, you are not able to change the people's behavior.
Sure. No, I think that's really good advice. So we're kind of running out of time, so maybe let's close the show with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself online.
So basically on my website is www.andreapicchi.it. It's AndreaPicchi.it, like Italy. And then on LinkedIn, if they want to connect with me, is just /Andrea Picchi, and on Twitter @Andrea Picchi. So
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show again, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your night.
thank you, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
All right, man. Have a good one. Later.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.